Hi, everyone. I'm James Garbutt.
And I'm Denny Dumas.
And this is the Garbutt Dumas Real Estate Podcast. Well, today we're going to talk about where to buy, and what questions to ask. It's James Garbutt here, and I'm with Monica Harms, and we want to just basically have a conversation about things to think about before buying your next home, because oftentimes we are doing a little bit of an interview process when we meet a new client or buyer. And our goal with that is to help them bring clarity so that we can hopefully land them a great place that they don't want to move from right away.
For sure. There's so much advice from friends and family and everyone loves to pitch in and give you their 2 cents when it comes to real estate. So we're just going to give you a nice, clear guidance on where to focus, where to put your energy. And it's a very important part of our interview process when we even take on new buyers.
Yeah. And let's be clear, we're not saying buy this right here at that price.
No.
The whole point of this is to help, everyone has a unique situation, and it's just to help bring clarity.
Right. I think the most common issue that a lot of our first-time home buyers run into always boils down to budget.
I was just going to bring that up. And it's a cold approach, but there's so many questions that follow budget, but budget does narrow options. So it might be a little bit blunt to say how much can you afford right out of the gates, but the reality is for a realtor, that limits options. If you don't have a budget for Vancouver proper, let's rule that out right away.
Right. I think I get a lot of new families that have been renting and they find themselves in situations where they're just too big for their rental and they want to jump right into a townhome, like a 3-bed townhouse for their first time purchase. I think that's probably one of the biggest.
It's an ambitious move.
Yes.
Some can do it, but most don't work their way up.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah. So I think the process starts with the budget. Look around, find out exactly what you can afford and see how that might fit in with your family and weigh the balances of, am I going to actually live in my first property that I own?
Yeah, sometimes it doesn't make sense. If you need a 3-bedroom and you can only afford a 1 or 2-bedroom, that may be an argument to have the first property as an investment property just to get your foot in the door and hopefully build equity for another day. Or that could be moving further out or going for an older 3-bedroom.
It's becoming increasingly more common for many first-time homebuyers to buy an investment property before ever moving in.
Sometimes you have to, It also helps your qualifications. If you're moving into a place, the bank wants to assure that, you can make that payment. But if you are, say, renting out a place and that rent is good, that helps your qualification. So just to add to that, because the budget part is big, and I think right now we're doing this podcast in August 2022. This is a year of a lot of change. So it's good to highlight, part of knowing your budget involves getting a pre-approval from a mortgage specialist. That pre-approval in a changing market, which today is changing largely because of interest rates, can change. So if you had a pre-approval done in February of this year, it may no longer be applicable. And a lot of, say, I think a very common example of where we're at today is maybe at the peak of lending, of stretching out what you can get, which was, let's call it February, maybe January. I can't remember the exact dates, but earlier this year, it's probably reduced in the neighborhood of 10% over the last 6 months. So what you qualified for 6 months ago might be 10% higher than today. And if you find yourself in a multiple offer situation, which is less common today, it is really important to know your budget and not stress out about committing yourself to a property without, certainty of getting that mortgage.
So I think when we meet with buyers, budget is the first thing.
Yeah.
And the second thing is just, what are your goals? What are your real estate goals altogether? Not just today, not just with this purchase, but what are your goals and your timeline over time? So maybe you're planning to buy a small apartment today, but are you hoping to own a detached property someday? Are you hoping to take whatever property you buy now and turn that into an investment property in the future? So your real estate goals are really, really important when making these decisions. And it's actually really exciting to set a plan up, because it's you kind of like mitigate risk when you know where you're headed.
And to some people, a goal is finding the perfect 1-bedroom condo that they want to live in for the next 10 years and make it their home. Some it's a family home. It's completely it's not a conversation around investment for some. It's purely about living and home and family, or if they're on their own place. And for others, it's about, we know that this next place is not where we want to be. We want to see it as a stepping stone to get to the next one. Maybe in a case where, say, the budget and the location don't always match up, that's a very common instance where we suggest making sure that rentals allowed is part of the criteria, just for flexibility, because oftentimes people are leaving a city or leaving an area that they're familiar with, and to help mitigate that risk, rentals allowed.
Man, rentals allowed is huge. If you're just starting out in real estate, rentals allowed. Make sure you have rentals allowed. It's a big one. Unless you are one of those buyers, like James just mentioned, that like you're going to hunker down, you're going to live there for 20 years, then who cares? But if it's a first stop for you, rentals allowed.
In some areas, like for example, the New Westminster Quay, a lot of the best apartments and condos have rental restrictions. So if you want to face the river, and a lot of the buildings in the New Westminster Quay, you're not going to have rentals allowed. If you buy pre-sale, you're grandfathered in to allow rentals for as long as you own the property. If you buy a place that has no rental restrictions, but say it's largely owner-occupied, there is always a risk that rental bylaws could change, and that could change the future outcome of you being able to rent your place. So just keep those things in mind.
Right. So budget, goals, and the other thing is lifestyle, right?
Oh, this is a big one.
Very
There's so
big.
many questions that come around lifestyle.
Yeah. I think where you work is the first thing. What can you tolerate for commute?
Where do you work? How do you get there?
Yeah.
Understanding work in today's day and age is crucial, because to some people, I mean, I think the biggest thing is when we see someone that lives in Kitts, which is paradise in Vancouver, in the west side, that wants to get their first place and has to look out to, say, New Westminster or Port Moody. That commute can devastate them. It could be an hour and a half both ways in the car, and it might rule that out. It might rule an area out completely.
The lifestyle choice for commute is really, really important. I've had some buyers that buy close to family. They buy a condo. For example, this one couple that I'm thinking of, they bought a place in Pitt Meadows. Their family lived nearby in Maple Ridge, and they wanted to start a family, so they head out to Pitt Meadows, but one of them works at VGH. And after 2 years, they called me and they're just like, we're selling this condo. We're moving back to the city. I don't see my parents enough for it to matter. They're going to drive to see us no matter where we are. This was a terrible decision. And so faced with the choice between living 10 minutes from family and living an hour from work, they're like, this is just not worth it. Gotta move closer to work.
Trade-off of size to time in car.
Yep.
A 900 square foot place in Vancouver, Burnaby might translate to a 1,500 square foot place with an extra bedroom in Pitt Meadows.
But if you never get to be there.
To some people, the space matters more. To others, the location matters more. And I think that's an important thing to ask yourself, and recognize that what your needs today might differ from your needs in 3 years, 5 years, if you're planning to have a family per se. It is frustrating. Not frustrating. I have sympathy for people that buy a place that's too small and outgrow it too quickly and are forced to upgrade because they have a child on the way and the market's down. It's, there's positives to upgrading when the market's down, but for a lot of people, it's often a frustrating experience because it takes longer to sell and it's not as quick and easy as a hot market.
Right. And it also depends on your frame of mind. Are you the type of buyer that you want to sell and just make a banging profit on this so you can tell all your friends, look at my great investment. I made so much money on this. Like, what kind of buyer are you? Or are you the kind that can, dust your hands off and be like, sweet, I broke even, headed to the next place? Like, you need to know who are you? What kind of buyer are you?
If you're willing to take a hit on a sale and there's a buy right after, usually you get a better outcome, especially if you're buying up.
Yeah.
So it's always hard to take a hit on a sale because you want to see that profit, and oftentimes you need that down payment money too. But down markets are a great time to upgrade. It's up markets when you have that highest profit on your place, and then you're buying a house that was gone up $200,000 in 6 months. So those are the tough ones. But location is what we're getting at from a commute, transit, work. How important is that to your lifestyle? And if work from home is on your agenda and you don't have to commute anywhere, or if your commute is sporadic all over the Lower Mainland, so it doesn't really matter where you are and you're location neutral, then the next questions we ask is, what is your lifestyle like? What are your interests? What are your hobbies? What are you doing on your spare time? Is it important for you to be close to outdoor amenities like parks and trails and beaches? Or are you more worried about or concerned about walkability and shopping?
Right. This is really important. I mean, knowing yourself, knowing what your lifestyle is like, or visualizing how you want your lifestyle to be is a really, really important step. Also, if you already have a family, taking into consideration, parks nearby, what type of daycares and schools and things are nearby. If you're the type of person that wants to stay long-term in a community, really like sinking your teeth into a certain neighborhood and community and knowing exactly where you're going to go ahead of time is going to save you the pain of trying to make that move later on.
Good. I mean, family questions are great. I have 3 kids myself, and I have a lot of clients that have kids, and it's really, I mean, understanding the schools that are in the area that you're thinking of. I mean, that's important. If flexibility is important to you, there's certain areas that have great public schools and only public schools, and there's certain areas that have great public schools and private options as well that aren't going to, kill your daily commute. And then there's just places that are just very central, Burnaby North, Vancouver East, that are close to the highway where you can get pretty much anywhere, but you're going to be living that commuting lifestyle in a short period of time. But when it comes to family and kids, there are certain parts of town where their new schools are getting portables right away because there's so many families going to those locations, and there's other parts of town where they're losing families. And, a very obvious one is the west side of Vancouver is losing families, and Cloverdale and Langley is gaining families, and they don't make schools big enough. And one thing that I kind of look at when, for me, active young kids is an obvious one is when you get to narrow down these areas that are very family oriented. I like driving the streets and counting basketball nets and hockey nets. It's a real obvious one that if there's no basketball hoops and hockey nets on the street, then there's probably not many kids around.
For sure. That's a big one. Yeah. In the summertime, if you're driving down the street and there's not a single child squirting another child that's screaming with a water gun, then you don't want to live there.
And it's, it might come across a bit creepy, but going around a neighborhood right after, school's out at 3:00, seeing how many kids are walking home from school in an area, that is definitely creepy to do. But,
it is creepy, but it's worthwhile.
It's worth it.
I have both buyers. Like my sister-in-law is one of them. She didn't want to live next to any kids, but she wanted a townhouse, and she didn't want to live in an age-restricted townhouse for investment purposes. And I was like, well, yeah, this is exciting. This is going to be really hard. And we did just exactly what you're saying. We spent time finding complexes that were, the complex itself is a little older. And oftentimes when you find older complexes, it tends to steer away from young families, unless, of course, it's really affordable, in which case young families are there. And after driving through several complexes in the Tri-Cities, we finally found one that was tame. The most tame, the fewest children outside, and then that's where she ended up landing. And then I do the opposite with other families. They want like a horde of neighborhood children to play with. So it's,
There's a huge benefit when you don't have to entertain your kids all the time, and they can just be self-entertained by neighborhood kids. So that, family, there's specific questions around that. The, North Shore is, if you have a larger, if we're talking suburb specific, you get more value in the valley, Cloverdale, Langley, Surrey, Maple Ridge, Pitt Meadows. If you work downtown and you have the budget for it, North Shore is often a popular option. Those are the areas that we work. South Surrey is loaded with options too, better, sunnier weather. But every part of town has a different feature to offer. And I think urban versus suburb paradise versus family-oriented versus walkability and shops, you're going to get a different vibe in, say, commercial than you are in, Mount Pleasant, Trout Lake, so...
The good news is the city is expanding. SkyTrain reaches more communities than ever before. Of course, Port Moody has a West Coast Express, 2 SkyTrains. Coquitlam has a SkyTrain now. It's making it more available to people who want that suburban lifestyle but still need to get to the city. So really knowing these communities that have public transit is important. And I think that's obviously where realtors come in. We kind of know the ins and outs, the secrets.
Yeah, ultimately, at the end of the day, when we're talking to a buyer or someone that's, some buyers are very open to where they live. They could be in North Vancouver or Langley.
Sometimes they're too open.
They're too open.
Yeah.
So, the part of the process to narrow that down is the suggestion is when you see a property that's in a neighborhood that you're considering, if kids are important. Go check it out before or after school. If whether kids or not are on the list, I always recommend going there at rush hour and doing that commute. So get up extra early one morning, drive to that property and drive that daily morning commute. A lot of people don't do it, but it's 1 or 2 hours of your life that will pay off or potentially help make you a much better or worse decision.
And I always make these little suggestions, and the few buyers that actually do these things find the search to be less painful, quicker, more focused. And the last really important thing I want to mention is pets. Pets is a big one. If you have pets, make sure you're looking in pet-friendly communities. I'm talking communities that allow the dogs to go to the beach with you, that allow the dogs to, go to some outdoor patios and things like that. There's a lot of amazing places to live. White Rock is one that's pretty restrictive when it comes to pets. So if you really want your pet to be your best friend, maybe steer clear of White Rock. But there's certain areas that you need to know that if you have pets, if your fur babies are important to you, like they're important to me.
Well, I mean, we both have dogs. I have 2 Australian cattle dogs, high energy dogs. In any urban setting, it is a challenge to get them the exercise they need. And, recently my family and I made the shift to the Seymour side of North Vancouver, and it is a dog culture. There's like 80% of the dogs are off leash, and it's not shunned upon. So
that's what I'm saying. People are okay with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Port Moody is very dog friendly.
For sure.
And I mean, anywhere that's on the outskirts seems to be more dog friendly. I think just people recognize once the dog's on trail, you let it be free.
Yeah.
But if you're an inner city, if you have a French bulldog or, a dog that doesn't need that many exercise, then, they have a lot of options. Ultimately, aside from location, there is the other thing about maintenance versus non-maintenance. If you're looking for a family home and you end up buying a 100-year-old heritage home or a 70-year-old, call it mid-century bungalow that has old wiring and old pipes, there's maintenance that comes with those homes, and you may not want to spend your time doing that. So there's the argument for some that want a turnkey property that's not going to take over their life because they can't do any work and they don't want to do any work and they don't want to hire trades. That might lean you more towards a townhouse or a newer home that's further out. Say Burke Mountain has tons of new homes. And for the same price of, say, a 2,000 square foot Burke Mountain home, you might be getting a 80-year-old home that's 2,000 square feet with an awkward layout in New Westminster that's going to have a project every year.
Oh, yeah. New drainage, new electrical, new plumbing, new roof, all of it.
The list can add up, and this is where your realtor comes in handy to help paint the picture of what your future summers and weekends are going to look like.
You're absolutely right. The maintenance is a big one, and it's not just the big ticket maintenance items, it's the weekly little redundant maintenance items, like the mowing the lawns, the pruning the trees, all those types of things. If you want a low maintenance lifestyle, there's some really amazing stratas that I would look at, and I would probably steer clear of detached altogether.
And we're doing this August 2022.
Yeah.
The market is shifting. You have a little time to breathe now. It's a great time to ask yourself some of these questions, to think about where you might make your next purchase, because you should get a better deal than you would have a few months ago.
You should.